This week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry with agriculture broadcasters Orion Samuelson and Max Armstrong, and featuring agriculture meteorologist Greg Solye. This week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH and your local Case IH dealer. Coming up on this weekend's broadcast, there is much work ahead for our farmers and ranchers. They await the opportunity to do it. Hello, everyone. We welcome you to this weekend's broadcast. Mr. Mike Pearson will be here momentarily. He'll share a market visit with you, so stay tuned for that. Meanwhile, indeed, many of our growers want to get some work accomplished. Here in these early days of April, many haven't been able to get to the field just yet. We spoke this week with the president of Case IH Global, Scott Harris, about that, and the fact that that work, when it starts, will be very fast and furious. And the folks who work with farmers will need to be prepared.
We're always ready. You can be assured of that, and certainly farmers can be assured of that. And as you know, every season comes with its own challenges. Farmers and our team are so used to dealing with the volatility and the dynamic weather conditions, and whether it's drought out west or the high moisture conditions we got today in the upper plains, et cetera. It's a challenge every year, one way or another, someplace or another, and we've certainly learned over the years how to handle it.
Supply chain issues have been significant in every industry in the country, from the retailing end all the way back. How have you folks dealt with this? It's not been without its struggles, I'm sure.
Biggest challenge that we're facing today is the supply chain. Our team, our production facilities have done an incredible job managing this inconsistent and volatile supply, changing line rates in the way we build machines in order to get finished product to producers in as timely a fashion as we can. But it's absolutely the biggest challenge that we've got today to produce product. There's a tremendous amount of demand. We're having challenges in meeting that demand today because of the difficulties we're having in supply chain, but we'll continue to work through them.
You look for alternative sources in times like this?
Yep, alternative sources. We're paying a tremendous amount of money to expedite freight, to fly things from around the globe to get them here in North America in time, and doing the same from North America suppliers to our production facilities around the globe. It's a constant 24/7 battle.
That cost of freight is something maybe gets lost in the discussion many times when we're talking about inflation, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And and it's the cost of expediting that freight, and then, as you know, fuel costs are going up. The cost of inputs everywhere is just really a challenge today.
And yet these times we continue to see innovation in your industry. You're advancing all the time.
We exist to serve farmers and help them do what they do, and that has driven our brand and our company for 180 years. And we've built our brand on a legacy of innovation. That innovation is designed to help farmers do more with every inch of land they work. And so we're committed to that, and we'll continue to be.
We have over here right next to us the autonomous concept tractor, and you folks are certainly looking at that too.
Autonomy is an incredible space right now. As you know, we revealed the world's first autonomous tractor in 2016 at the Farm Progress Show, and we've been taking learnings from this journey, this journey to autonomy for some time, and taking those learnings and applying them today into functional automation to help producers, farmers, get the value out of these learnings along the way. Soil command in our tillage tools would be one example of that. Providing, automatically adjusting the depth that the tines will go while doing a tillage function in the field, so that farmers can go make more efficient use of speed and control their speed across the field, saving fuel. Harvest command would be another example where we don't just give the operator a suggestion of what to do. We're actually automating machine adjustments on the fly, adjusting for crop conditions, soil conditions, ambient weather conditions, et cetera. It's quite amazing.
These developments continue to come along with the guidance of farmers. Am I correct? You sample farmer input all along the way.
Without question, and we've been doing this for some time. We call it CDPD, customer-driven product development or design, and they're involved in the process before we even decide what's going into our next machine. We're assessing and asking farmers, what are your biggest challenges today? And frankly, that's why we went to this autonomous and in this autonomy route today. Labor is one of the biggest challenges that farmers are experiencing today, and this is helping us either fill some of that labor gap and or allow a less skilled producer not to negatively impact a farmer's production.
Scott Harris also shared how his company is working on electric vehicles. We'll pass along those remarks next week here.
This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. The Firestone Ag Dealer Network offers you the support, inventory, and resources you need. Visit firestoneag.com to find your local certified dealer. And it's time to talk markets. Darren Newsom of Newsom Analysis joins us today. Darren, we've seen inflation in the news a lot today. Both the CPI and the PPI numbers came out higher than analysts were expected. Are we continuing to see money managers invest in commodities as a hedge against inflation?
Yeah, and that's what's really fascinating here. If we look at the open interest in these markets, they're continuing to go up. So we've got money still flowing into commodities at these incredibly high prices. So that tells us a couple things. One, money managers are still a little bit concerned about inflation. And two, the fundamentals of these markets have not changed. We're still short of everything. And as long as that's the case, we're going to continue. I mean, these markets are going to stay well supported. They should continue to go higher. We don't know how high, but it's going to continue to draw money because fundamentally it says it should.
Well, Darren, looking over at the corn market this past week, we had an announcement from President Joe Biden that E15 will now be allowed for sale year-round. As you think about that in the context of corn demand, does this change your balance sheet much for the corn for ethanol component?
It's certainly going to tighten up an already tight supply and demand situation. If we look at available stocks to use, and I'm not talking about the official numbers, I'm talking about the real numbers. We're in an incredibly tight situation as it is at this point. And now we've got planting being pushed back. We've got the idea that, we're going to have more ethanol demand. So yes, I think this is going to play a role. Certainly the market seemed to know about it because not only have we had an inverse in the old crop future spreads, but we've also got an inverse in the new crop spreads. And I think what this is really going to do is it's really going to light a fire under both the July and September contracts as we make our way through the spring and summer.
Darren, as you look out a little bit longer term, get us into new crop December corn. Have we reached a level that producers should be looking at getting some sales on?
It's one of those things, like you and I have talked about this many times. And if my dad was sitting across the table from me and asking if this is a good place to sell, I would not talk him out of it. This is a good price, but I wouldn't sell a lot. We don't know how high this market may go. We don't know how tight this situation is going to get. But as long as fundamentals are bullish, as long as money continues to come into the market, sell a little bit. If you need to cover some input costs, sell some grain, but keep most of the powder dry. Because again, this is a very bullish situation. But the structure of the market's incredibly bullish at this point. Just let it run as much as possible.
Darren, eventually, I imagine prices will get high enough, we'll start to see some demand destruction. As you're watching for that level, where do you think we're going to see it impacted first?
I think it's probably going to be on the feed. Exports are still good, and with the problem going on, with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, exports could stay strong for U.S. corn for quite some time. Ethanol demand, we've talked about. Gasoline demand continues to go up. Maybe that starts to weaken a little bit if it gets high enough. But to me, the problem could be feed demand later on. Right now, there's a lot of cattle on feed, and they have to eat something. That's not going to go away anytime soon, but possibly by the time we get to the end of 2022, into the 2022-23 marketing year, we could start to be looking at some smaller on-feed numbers, potentially some smaller feed demand.
Darren, we have seen feed demand accelerate on the wheat side of the commodity ledger here in this country. Looking at the wheat market, where do you see it moving here in the short term?
It's got to go up. I shouldn't say that. That's a horrible thing to say, particularly from Kansas, because we all know it doesn't have to go up. But if we look...
This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. Harvey Firestone invented the first pneumatic farm tire, forever changing what it means to farm hard. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more about this history and tire solutions for today. And we're talking markets with Darren Newsom of Newsom Analysis. And Darren, let's look over at the soybean market. We've just come through the Brazilian harvest of their first crop of soybeans, dismal production. Are we starting to see buyers look elsewhere in the world for their soybean needs?
Yes, they are. And when you say elsewhere, they're coming back to they're still coming to the United States. One of my fears here, because by my calculation, again, stocks to use are either near or at record levels, record tight. So, and we continue to make new sales. Even in the latest weekly export sales and shipment number, we saw another 20 million bushels sold with 16 million for China. Now, that was old business. But the fact is we're still adding sales rather than seeing cancellations or rolling to new crop at a time when we just don't have any available soybeans. So this situation is going to get very interesting. We've seen an inverse in the spreads for months now. And as we go out to new crop, the soybean new crop situation is actually more bullish than what we see in corn. There's just not going to be enough bushels. There's not going to be enough production to loosen this situation up much.
Darren, even if U.S. farmers plant that projected 92 million acres of beans or 90.2 million acres of beans, we're not going to have enough?
That's what the market's saying. I mean, and really, the numbers are irrelevant. I mean, they're all made up anyway. The numbers are irrelevant. What the market's saying, production's not going to be enough right now, whatever those numbers turn out to be.
All right. So how far out into the future do you see the market telling you that? What do the spreads say? Is that true all the way until next summer of 23?
Actually, we could go out through the 2023-24 marketing year. So that takes us through the summer of 2024. Now, the issue we have out that far is there's very little open interest, very little trade volume. But if we just look at prices, that's what the market's telling us. We're in a few years here where we're not going to be able to really loosen up this tight supply and demand situation all that much.
So, Darren, if it is such a tight supply and demand situation, what's the incentive for producers to sell now to manage that new crop risk? Or do you just hold off?
Yeah, the incentive is these are incredible prices. I mean, and if they want to sell beans in the teens, this is certainly their opportunity to do so. Could it go higher? Sure. I have no idea how high it might go. So again, just as with corn and the other markets, keep plenty of powder dry to see if what we can sell later on. But for now, if you want to make some sales, it's not going to be a bad sale.
Darren, let's look over at the livestock market. Summertime, often the prime season for the cattle markets, that grilling demand kicks off. Looking out into this year, what are your concerns here as we approach the summer?
My concern goes back to the first thing you brought up, and that's inflation, and what that's going to do to discretionary spending. And when we talk about discretionary spending, one of the first things that comes to mind is high-priced beef, and beef really is one of the higher-priced proteins in the market right now. So, how long can boxed beef and boxed beef, both choice and select, stay this high? And if it starts to come under pressure, and we're still dealing with a large supply situation, and all of a sudden demand starts to wane, that's not a good combination. And again, if we bring it back to spreads, the only market that I look at with bearish spreads is live cattle. That hasn't changed for quite some time. Could it change later in 2022? Absolutely. But right now, that's still the most bearish market that we have.
So do you see this downtrend in cattle prices happening for the remainder of the summer, Darren?
I think it could. We're going to get some bounces. We've seen cash, was stuck at 138 for a number of weeks, popped up, it looks like this week, maybe into the 139, 140 range. I just don't think it's going to take off and fly. I think there's plenty of supply. And if cattle, you're going to be able to move into the system, and then all of a sudden it starts to back up on what's coming out of the plant. That's going to make it tough to continue to push prices higher.
It certainly will, folks. We've been talking to Darren Newsom of Newsom Analysis here on This Week in Agribusiness.
Chad Colby's look at agriculture technology comes your way next, brought to you by the IBM Watson Decision Platform, combining AI with Internet of Things data to help agribusiness increase yields, improve quality, and drive sustainability. Well, the man who constantly tweets to his followers the other day put out a Tweel tweet. What's that all about? Let's find out.
Some technology out there, all of us, including myself, are a little slow to adapt. Recently, I was in the market for a mower upgrade, and I stopped at my local John Deere dealership, and one of the things he asked me right away, a good friend of mine, said, "Have you checked out the airless radial tire called a Tweel on your next mower purchase. And honestly, I've seen it around. It's been around for a long time. I believe it came out around 2015. So it's not new. But like all technology, sometimes it takes a little time for it to be its mainstay. But the opportunity presented itself where I could drive both of these mowers, one with conventional pneumatic and one with Tweel technology, myself. And let me tell you, it is an absolute game changer as far as the ride of the machine. Now, I did make a post on Twitter and talk to a few people that have had them, and they said it's a must-have on your mower from a couple things. The obvious is there. You're not going to have a flat tire, right? The life of the tire is 2 to 3 times better than pneumatic, so that's a good thing. But as far as the characteristics of using a mower, that's where things really pick up some massive efficiencies. Number one, you've got a consistent hub height, so that tire's not bouncing as much as a pneumatic tire, especially at speed. The other part is that I was a little concerned about is, what is it like on a hillside? Well, that flat edge allows you to have more contact area, so it's a lot better on the hillside, and I actually have some road frontage that I need to do that with, so that was another characteristic I really liked. But overall, I was sold on this technology pretty quickly, especially when the dealer told me at least 80% of his new mowers are going out with this technology now. It is retrofittable, so if you've got an older mower, you can put it on. It's also available for skid loaders, side-by-sides, and a lot of other machines as well. If you haven't seen it, I highly encourage you to check it out.
Chad didn't say how that Tweel performs in very soggy conditions for those who might get hung up in the spring. Just asking for a friend here now. Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness, where we get to visit with a longtime friend of ours. Notice I didn't say old friend. Susan Littlefield is a friend we've known for a long time, past president of the National Association of Farm Broadcasting, highly regarded farm broadcaster across the heart of the country, Rural Radio Network, KRVN, and you're based in Nebraska, but where you're sitting at the moment is Surprise, Nebraska. Am I right?
It is. I'm very fortunate to get to work out of my home, which is, I did before it was COVID cool. Let's just put it that way. So I'm here on the farm, which gives me a great opportunity when we're lambing and when we're kidding to be here when needed.
I love it when you share some of those social media images of what's happening there, the arrival of new life among those on your farm. And you also show at the Nebraska State Fair, as I recall. You've done that in the past.
Yeah, we as a family, we show registered Columbia sheep, and we also showed wool in the state's wool show every year. So it's a great opportunity to be there, not only behind the microphone like I am the whole run of the state fair, but to be in the show ring as well.
We've watched weather extremes in recent days. We know it's too wet in the eastern Corn Belt. We know there's been too much snow in the northern plains. In Nebraska, where you're very heavily reliant upon that Ogallala aquifer for irrigation in the summer, what's the situation right now?
Dire. I have not seen so many comments on social media asking, please send prayers for rain. We know that the South, Oklahoma, Kansas always seems to need rain. And now Nebraska is in desperate need of rain as well, and then add to the fact that we really haven't had much snow on the eastern half. At our place, I think we got maybe 3/4 of an inch total the entire winter snow season. I didn't shovel once this last year. It was great for cattle in the feedlots. It was great for cow-calf, great for lambing, but unfortunately it's not going to be great when it comes to replenishing our soil moisture for planting crops and obviously getting that hay crop going, which brings up a whole nother concern of some winter kill issues.
The wind, that's the thing that's really come to mind in recent days from folks with whom I have visited and the social media posts that I've seen. It has been brutal, hasn't it?
It has, and we finally, as you and I are talking, we still have some wind. It's not as bad as what it has been in the past, but we definitely still have the wind issues. We saw gusts. If we looked at Tuesday the 12th, we had gusts of 50 and 60 miles an hour. And Tuesday morning, there was the hope that slight chance of rain we were supposed to get. There was a lot of guys out in the field. They were, stock chopping. They were maybe knifing in some anhydrous, different things to prepare for the rain that we didn't get, but instead got those high winds. And the winds have been around here for a good week plus. And Nebraska's known as being a windy state, but nothing like what we've seen in the last week.
The winds have propelled fires, certainly, and we've seen those images, not only blowing dust, but blowing smoke. They've been quite serious in some instances, right?
They definitely have, and we know that what's called, the fire that took out in Gosper Furnace County is also known as the Road 739 fire. So if viewers wanted to Google it, it's known as the Road 739 fire. Started because of high winds, knocking a dead tree branch onto an electrical line. And unfortunately, the winds, it was the perfect storm, Max. All the elements were there with the humidity. We've been in red flag warnings. I don't remember the last time I haven't looked at a forecast where we've talked red flag warnings. So it was literally the perfect storm to bring some fires.
Unfortunately, and this hits close to home for you, I know, because you have been a member of the Rural Fire Service for many years. You lost a firefighter a few days ago.
We did. Funeral services were on Wednesday for Chief Darren Krull, and it was tough. When you heard that a firefighter was killed, it doesn't matter if it's from your department or not. It's one of your brothers. And our governor had flags at half staff. Our unicameral, which is our legislative system here in Nebraska, actually took a moment of silence. The governor, during one of his news conferences, took a moment of silence as well. It was just one of those really freak accidents. A water truck and their pickup collided in the dense smoke as they were out there trying to fight the fires. And Justin Norris, who is the Phelps County Emergency Management Director, was driving the vehicle with the fire chief at the accident. He's been sent to Omaha. He's in critical condition, but he is recovering. So our thoughts and prayers, continue with his family, with the water truck driver's family, and of course, the entire, Elwood Fire Department as they work through the loss of their fire chief.
One thing I read about Darren, and it struck me, it was kind of your stereotypical image of this rural fire service servant, if you will. I think he worked for the local co-op and then had donated over many, many years, a lot of his time, not only to the rural fire service, but to EMS as well.
Yeah, he was very active, and all the things that we've read, he gave back beyond that. I mean, he was such a mentor to not only his department, but all the surrounding departments and folks across the state. As memorials come in, folks are really, praising the work that he did. He died doing what he loved, and that was helping to protect his community. I mean, we're talking 34,000 acres, Max, plus that were burned. And as of today, it's still 75% contained. So there's a lot of work yet to do and mourning that's going on as they continue to go on the line and fight these fires.
Susan, it's a powerful reminder for sure that we need to appreciate the folks in the Rural Fire Service, the volunteers such as yourself at Surprise, Nebraska. Thank you and all of your colleagues. Susan Littlefield in Nebraska, Rural Radio Network, KRVN, here on This Week in Agribusiness. This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH. Welcome back to this weekend's edition of This Week in Agribusiness. One thing we like about being able to host this show is the opportunity to visit with friends, people we've known for quite some time. There's one in the studio this weekend. We welcome Steve Pitstake, who is chair of the Illinois Soybean Association.
Yes, Max, thanks for having me on. It was a long drive to get here.
Yeah, you farm within about 2 miles of our studio
we
here,
do.
I think.
That's kind of the eastern edge of our area that we cover.
In a metropolitan area, and it gets even more interesting all the time, I suppose, for those of you, and that's an increasing segment of the ag community, those who farm in and around big cities.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. It's challenging. The things we can do, we can't do. Moving equipment is always fun. Once in a while I get told I'm number one, but that's just part of the deal. So.
That's part of the deal. You in the business of corn and soybean planting right now, many of you haven't turned a wheel, and we're looking at the calendar here, Easter weekend. We're not to the middle part of Easter just yet, but the clock is ticking, and yield erosion can occur as time passes. Talk with us about your view.
Yeah, so I'm not nervous yet, but I'm starting to. Looking at the extended forecast, looks like we may get a break by the end of next week. Over the past couple of years, we've got an early start, early April. Last year, we started planting on the 9th of May or 9th of April. Got going, had really good crops. Setting this planting date back, the rest of the summer has a lot to tell to the final story, but just not sure if we're off to a good start. We'll see.
It's a good start is crucial, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I'd like to have the corn and beans come up in a week. Sometimes we've gone 3-4 weeks planting early. This year we may be delayed planting and it comes up very quick. So we'll just see where it goes.
Soybeans earlier for many, many growers. They've changed the routine a little bit, and it's paying off for them.
Yeah. We started our own operation, started planting soybeans early in 2012, 2013. It's something that we found just gives more days to that plant to put on more pods and more yield. The soybean, the development has brought us a hardier plant. Corn is kind of a prima donna. It's got to be just right to get maximum yield. So we're kind of planting soybeans first, and then the corn coming in second.
When you take a look at the economics, with the cost of production being what they are, that break-even price is quite elevated for both corn and beans, but fortunately, commodity prices are too.
Yeah,
it works
exactly.
right now, doesn't it?
Yeah, today it works very well. Not knowing what the summer may bring, what prices will be. We're always looking for a potential black swan that we didn't see coming that could disrupt those prices. But things look really good now. Our own operation, we got a lot of things bought last summer, last fall. We're sitting in a pretty good shape. After last Friday's crop report, intended planting acres, we may be shifting some soybean acres back to corn. Just depends on the weather, depends on a lot of things.
2023. It's a little scary, isn't it?
Yeah, much more scary 2023. We've got most of our fertilizer for 2022 in place. Just not sure what the logistics will be for 2023. What the cost, all the costs are going to go up. Rent's going to go up. Land prices have gone up. Machinery availability. 2022 I feel pretty good about, but 23 I'm nervous.
Your website for your association provides some real good guidance to your growers, as many associations do, but especially I want to call attention to yours.
Yes, we've got a fantastic agronomy team that we've built, working on a lot of things with farmers on no-till, cover crops, things like that. Moving forward, Soy Envoy, which gives access to CCAs with different ideas on agronomic tips and that. Just trying to help the producer overall.
The website is?
ilsoy.org.
That's easy to remember,
Yes,
ilsoy.org.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Great to see you again. Thanks for the visit.
Thanks for the opportunity, Max.
Steve Pitstake joining us this weekend, chair of the Illinois Soybean Association. Greg Solye now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead, presented by Pivot BioProven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot BioProven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com. The big question many of you will have that I need to ask Greg Solye, will it be like last week? My goodness, so many areas so profoundly affected by that big frontal movement.
That's right, from the blizzard to the north, severe weather, and then dust storms and heat down south to flooding rain in the southeast. And over the past month, April, 1.6 inches of snow at Portland, Oregon. It's never snowed in Oregon, at least at Portland, for the month of April. Testimony to how cold it has been and kind of the westward progression of that cold. A different setup this week, and thank goodness that applies to the calving operations here across the northern plains, upper Midwest, southern Canadian prairie. You wanted moisture for the drought, but for the wrong time, the wrong reason. Tough go of it on that operation. But a system offshore will move inland, and a warm front as well. So we'll get some milder air to move into the northern plains, drying out as well here in rapid snowmelt to boot. Watch your step accordingly there. Next frontal system a little farther south into maybe northern California, where a couple of showers are also anticipated. We'll see a southern reflection of that in the southwestern states here later in the week. Otherwise, it's an onshore flow, lots of sunshine and quiet weather over this part of the country, coming off the sandstorms, the dust storms, the 60-mile-an-hour winds and 90-degree heat. A little more tolerable out there. Quiet across the central and southern valleys of California. We're already into the runoff season across the Sierra as well, coming off a very disappointing winter precip season. Maybe a stray shower out towards Napa for the middle to late portions of the week. Warm, dry weather across much of the Great Plains. A little lingering moisture down across parts of Texas. They can take any and every drop of rain down there in that drought-ridden area.
Yeah. You mentioned the 60-mile-an-hour winds. My friend Robert, who farms in that Mobridge area, said it's been day after day after day.
That's right, and 30 inches of snow around the Minot-Bismarck area and upwards towards Lake Winnipeg. So it's cold. It's been bitter relative relative to springtime in that part of the country, but much quieter. Thaw-free cycles, a little weak system and a couple of snowflakes and sprinkles into the Great Lakes region. You'll note a much quieter, drier west to east flow on the maps and charts here, so opportunities to dry things out and maybe a little field work perhaps into parts of the Corn Belt. All quiet as well across the Great Plains areas. And we got a little bit of a frontal boundary here hung up across the Rio Grande. It will generate some sense of moisture, not enough to make a significant dent in the drought, but it is something. Western and southern Texas, dry, cool weather, allowing for the streams and rivers and maybe a resumption of field work coming off the barrage of severe weather last week over this section of the country. And again, a pretty quiet setup expected. Milder air moves into the southern Corn Belt and a shower activity western Gulf and across sections of the Rio Grande.
How about down the East Coast? What do you see?
Weather is pretty uneventful here with one weather system across the mid-Atlantic region. Maybe a little late season rain snow mixture here, a little fast moving clipper system, a couple of sprinkles and snowflakes for the northern and eastern Great Lakes. And then it's into a drier setup, milder air west to east across the Corn Belt. Opportunities for the streams and rivers to come on down here, a little field work and a complex weather system over the northeast and New England. Over the southeastern states, much quieter across the Gulf Coast for now, but the weather systems will make their run up across the Piedmont. Severe weather down through Florida, wet weather in Texas, but to the north across the Tennessee Valley, dry high pressure will be in control later in the week.
Greg Solye is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country, presented by Pivot Bio-Proven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot Bio-Proven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com. I had a flashback the other day when I saw all of that snow dumped into North Dakota. It was a chilling reminder of how it can be in whiteout conditions. Greg Solye, a few years ago, we were up around Osnabrück in the extreme northeast corner of North Dakota in whiteout conditions. I was never more fearful as a snowstorm in my life.
Yeah, punishing weather is another way to call it up there, not only in your experience, but over the past week, some of those spots, 2, almost 3 feet of snow, and each and every day that wind 40, 50, 60 miles per hour. So some cleanup and recovery issues here, especially impacted the calving operations. There'll be maybe another weak system late in the week generating some moisture here. And again, it's not all bad. Its moisture will melt it into the soils. Note the wet weather in this part of the country, severe weather down through Florida. Don't need any more of it here. Some drier weather across the heartland, a touch of winter in the northeast and New England, and some late weak moisture for parts of California and the Pacific Northwest too.
In the final days of April, it ought to warm up. We generally think the warmth will come. Will it?
No, not north and east. Here it is, holding out across the areas of the western states down through Texas, normal in the southeastern part of the country. Get ready for this lobe to just kind of be back and forth much of the springtime season, and it is the cool and the cold that makes the moisture. But there is some late season optimism for a little bit of something in the southwestern section of the country approaching May 1, Pacific Northwest, Northern Plains. Keep an eye on this slog with melting snow drying out over the southeastern part of the country. That's good news. And parts of the northeast and New England as well.
Show me your warmth for the first full week of May. Come on.
Yeah, we're getting there. You know, you got to be able to, crawl before you can walk and run. So we're back, at least back to normal over parts of the Corn Belt, eastern areas, the last of the cold into this part of the country, normal in the southeast, and a bit of warmth across West Texas, the southwestern section of the country, and Intermountain West. It's still a northwest to southeast jet stream pattern, so systems will zip along, but a propensity for above average moisture, more drought relief. That's a good way to positively spin it into the northern plains, getting too wet over the eastern Corn Belt. Moisture for the northeast to New England, back to normal over the southeast, high and dry into Texas and the southwest too.
I still worry about tornadic activity in May. I remember Joplin and some others over the years in the month of May. What do you see as we advance through the month?
It is that time of the year and probably a little busier setup. And look at this setup here from the cold to the north, the warmth down to the south, and a little trough across this part of the country. It's a pretty sizable trough for that matter. So you get this, some good news Pacific Northwest. So into the northern plains, a rough go of it, probably with frequent showers and thunderstorms over much of the Corn Belt, the southeastern states, and the likelihood in this corridor right here, right under the jet, for heavy and severe and tornadic activity. Back into dry time, little change in the southwest.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, spotlighting another great American tractor.
We certainly enjoy hearing about tractor restorations, especially if there was involvement of a family member. I love it when I hear about a granddad, a father, grandmother perhaps, helping out with a tractor restoration. This is a family effort. This John Deere GP in Wisconsin. I'll talk about it in Max's Tractor Shed. Brought to you by Store Lock Tool Cabinets. Go to their website. Look at what they can do for you to liven up your shop, to put stuff where it belongs, where you can find it. StoreLock.com. Well, Gavin Clifton at Jefferson, Wisconsin, explained to me this wasn't his first John Deere tractor restoration. In fact, I believe he had restored a B. He had restored a John Deere 60. Some of this was through his FFA work and with the assistance of his dad. But take a look at this John Deere GP made in 1931. One thing he explained to me was that his family indeed has been very supportive. And he explained that his mother took the pictures. And when you look at this shot, you can see, now don't look at the tractor, look at the shadow cast there by the photographer. I think indeed Gavin did get a helping hand from Mom in capturing the image.
Max, happy Easter to everyone out there. We're getting ready for our April 20th online auction with over 2,080 items selling to the highest bidder with no reserves on BigIron.com. Bradley Heinrich is from Rockton, Illinois. He's got a rare find, one owner, 2002 year model AGCO DT160 mechanical front tractor. Max, only 111 hours on this machine. It's been stored inside and the plastic is still on the seat. Now the Merle Neiman Estate will take place in Winnebago, Nebraska on April the 20th. They've got 132 items. Most items were purchased brand new. There's a 1990 Case IH Magnum 7110 two-wheel drive tractor, only 3,451 hours on this machine. They've also got a 1984 International 5288, a 986, a 1066, a 766, and a Farmall 450. Check out their Case IH 2166 combine as well. Now, Randy Brabeck is from Clarkson, Nebraska. They are retiring, selling their Gleaner R42 combine. They have a new Idea 3622 manure spreader that's like new, plus a John Deere 4440 power shift and a John Deere 4230 with a chrome stack. That's getting a lot of attention. Unlimited Construction and Development Inc. out of Gibson City, Illinois. They're selling a Case 850K crawler dozer. They've got a JCB 220 LC excavator, plus their Cat Challenger 75D track tractor with a new engine and new tracks. Just outstanding equipment selling on April the 20th. Go to BigIron.com for all the information.
We so love sharing the FFA story with you each weekend through the voices and the images of FFA members, such as the state treasurer in Ohio, Mackenzie Ott. Welcome to This Week in Agribusiness. Tell us about your FFA experience.
Yeah, it's so great to be here. So I started out in FFA my freshman year, and I just simply joined because my sister was like, hey, why don't you put it on your schedule because it's just changed my life so much. You should do it too. So I joined FFA, and I never thought I would be sitting here right now. But throughout my time in the Blue Jacket, I definitely took every opportunity I could so I could get the most out of it.
So you're sharing that story now with others, I would imagine, who are your junior, to hear a little bit about FFA as you are a state officer and you'll be going off to college, I guess, next year.
Yes, I have. I've definitely been able to share my story across the state of Ohio. And it's really a heartfelt thing when you think of it, because when you get to tell people about your personal story, you also get to hear about their story. And it's just so interesting to hear how other people got started in FFA and where they're at now.
The advisors are so important too. I was reminded the other day, a friend of mine, Mr. Don Sturgeon, who had taught for decades at Hagerstown, Indiana, passed away, and I noticed all of the comments from his former students. He was so loved, and it made such an impression. Advisors are key people too, aren't they?
They definitely are. So advisors, they push you because they see the potential in you even before you've seen it in yourself. And I'm grateful for my advisor who has pushed me to be the best person I can become when I didn't even know it.
Who is that advisor?
Lucy Bambauer.
I knew we had to do a shout out. Mackenzie Ott, thank you. Good to have you with us this weekend.
Thank you so much.
Mackenzie Ott, State Treasurer, Ohio FFA. I'd call them the Agricultural Air Force. Many of them are family operations. Those aerial applicators like Jim Perrin from Wisconsin. He'll join us next year on This Week in Agribusiness. If you were with us last week on This Week in Agribusiness, you heard us talking about the role of the aerial applicators. The fact that about 28% of the cropland in the United States gets visited sometime during the year by those folks in what I would call the Agricultural Air Force, the aerial applicators. Jim Perrin is one of those. He flies out of Bancroft, Wisconsin. In fact, he works very closely with his spouse, as he explained to me, as he operates 3 GPS systems on his plane to put that crop input exactly where it's needed.
My wife will actually email the maps and the mix and the prescription for that field to the airplane. Myself or either one of my pilots, and this is the case for the industry, we'll go out and we'll spray the field based on what we get emailed to us in the GPS. And then after we get back, we will in turn email the job file back to the office, and that'll have the as applied and all the weather information all on it automatically.
We can't help but think of how farmers are affected by the weather, but boy, you guys have to watch it so closely, and not all the days are severe clear, are they?
That's right. On a foggy morning or a windy day, I always tell my wife my next career will have nothing to do with the weather.
I can imagine. And, you know, it's a fairly narrow window of opportunity for you, is it not, in many instances?
Yeah, and that's the big advantage behind aircraft. We can do a lot of acres in a hurry. So if there's a pest outbreak or if there's a weather event that causes plant injury, we can get out there and treat that plant and hopefully protect it before disease can take hold, or if there's a pest outbreak with bugs, we can generally get that taken care of before it becomes a widespread issue.
Am I correct that part of the maintenance of your equipment is indeed calibration of your nozzles and your boom to make sure that you're applying with the kind of precision that you want and need?
That's correct. And in fact, a lot of the vegetable companies now require what's called a gap study. So at the beginning of the season, we'll provide all of the paperwork that shows that the airplane or helicopter has been pattern tested, what nozzles we're running, how the spray pattern looks. We're looking for a uniform pattern to evenly control the pest.
And again, putting the crop input exactly where it's needed. That just as the farmer does, he doesn't want to waste any.
That's correct. When I first started Max, it was kind of interesting. We would get a work order for a farm and it would be the same product for the entire farm. And now we'll actually take fields, and I've seen field prescriptions come in now that have taken one field and split it into 3 separate applications, and 3 different parts of the field will get a separate application altogether. So the whole thing has changed substantially. What we used to look for one product to go out and do a day's work, now we're going to be changing. So each application is a prescription for that individual field.
It's just as tricky as it looks, isn't it, to fly one of these aircraft? And how close to the ground are you for most of your application work?
For our liquid application, we look to be about 50% of the wingspan on a fixed wing. Most of the fixed wing airplanes are between 50 and 60 feet wide overall, so we want to be around that 25-foot mark above the crop when we're spraying at the max. And then when we're doing dry, we'll go up. If we're doing fertilizer or, for instance, seeding cover crop, we'll climb up to about telephone pole height or treetop height. And the helicopters generally will work around 10 feet high. And that's changed our droplet spectrums, but we do need a little bit of altitude in order to get the entire spray pattern to fill in correctly.
So what about the pluses of the helicopter versus the fixed wing aircraft? Does the wash from the blades force some of the product down into the plants a little bit better with a helicopter?
Actually, once the helicopter goes through transitional lift, it's really, really similar to an airplane. The big advantage to the helicopter is they're much more maneuverable. So a lot of times, like in our business, we'll use the helicopter where we're in tight next to a lot of people or a lot of obstructions or obstacles, and then that helicopter can turn in tighter, stay closer to the field, whereas the fixed wing is generally a little bit heavier and a little bit faster, so it takes us a little more real estate to get turned around. So an advantage or a disadvantage, personally, I feel each tool is a tool in the toolbox, whether that's a ground rig, a helicopter, an airplane, or eventually the UASs.
Yes, as Jim Perrin pointed out there, those unmanned aircraft will be addressing the needs along with those fixed-wing aircraft at 120 miles an hour, the helicopters up in the fields at 90 miles an hour, unsung heroes in crop production, the agriculture aviators. Well, it was an unmanned aircraft that Dave Kestel, our farmer friend not far out of Chicago, put up over his field the other day. No, not at all recreational tillage out there in his field with his tractor and his tillage tool. You'd have to say inspirational tillage, reminding us of the importance of this weekend for so many of us. We hope it's a wonderful weekend for you and your family. We look forward to being with you again next weekend on This Week in Agribusiness. On behalf of Mike Pearson, Greg Solye, Chad Colby, Orion Samuelson, we hope you have a great week. Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Kubota. Shape your world. This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by Omax Communications in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.